Hi, I'm Tom Metzger, your host for Race and Reason. Race and Reason, dedicated to freedom of speech, that small island of free speech in a sea of controlled and managed news. And believe me, it's getting more controlled all the time. Our guest today is Anna Kephart. She has been a guest on our show before, and Anna was involved in prisoners' rights projects. And now she's come back to the show with another story that's very interesting if you're interested in constitutional rights. Nice to have you with us, Anna.
It's very nice to be back, Tom, and it's my honor to be here today.
I see you brought me a few things here. I'm going to hold this up and let's get this story started.
Well,
what has been happening to you since the last time we took on Big Brother?
Well, quite a bit. Most of it has pretty much leveled off. Basically, after I saw you last, there a couple issues had passed. One of them we had discussed visiting within federal custody and the problems. And I must say I'm very happy to admit that I did write to Washington, made an issue of common law status wives, that we were just as important as married wives and should have the same status for visiting.
And this was in federal prison.
In federal prison.
Yes.
And I must say that that particular subject was passed. Washington did approve it. And at the prison where I was visiting, they now acknowledge common law status wives.
So
that
they
didn't before.
All over the country, all federal prisons?
I am not certain of that.
But
In the particular one I was at, yes.
So you made some headway there, but all of a sudden, whammo, you're back in the soup again.
Hotter than ever.
Huh?
Hotter than ever.
Okay, now, you brought us, now there's a picture of a young man in a Marine uniform, and I see over here it says, con man trades planning post for jail cell.
That is very true. This is only one of numerous articles on a Mr. Mark Esparza. He was a former city planning commissioner in a high desert community where I live. He was an ex-convict who was determined that even though he had a record, he wanted to be in politics, and no one asked him had he a criminal record. He applied, got the job, and because he did have a record, they found out he was dismissed from the job and his parole revoked simply because he falsified his job application.
Now here's a man he served his time.
He was attempting to.
Okay, and he applied for this job, and was there any place on the application to ask whether he was
No.
an ex-felon or anything like that?
No, absolutely not, Tom. When he had applied for the job, he originally applied for redevelopment. He was so good on his resume and so well qualified, or so the mayor thought, that he requested he apply for City Planning Commission. I have the paperwork with me. There is no mention whatsoever of criminal record. They didn't ask him, and he wasn't going to voluntarily disclose this because he knew if that factor came up, more than likely he wouldn't even be considered for the job.
Well, what drew your attention to this story?
I was drawn to this story because since I've seen you last, I went back to college and I became a reporter on our paper. And when I saw one of the headlines in the paper pertaining to Mr. Esparza, I says, well, I believe, knowing that I've known ex-cons and the problem of gainful employment, I would like to do an interview with him and see what he has to say.
So you contacted
So I
him.
contacted him, and that's when the whole thing started, and I became involved and had my home searched, and I'm in the middle of a federal lawsuit right now.
Okay, now wait. You were contacted, you met with him, you said, I think on a Monday?
I met with Mr. Esparza on March 15th, which was a Sunday.
Sunday, and you tell me your house was raided on Friday.
That's true.
We're going to get into this police state type stuff again, huh?
Most definitely.
Now, why would they invade a reporter's home? I understand they broke the door down, broke the frame right off the door, the whole bit.
That is still of amazement to me. I still do not know to this date all the real reasons, although a few of them are unfolding.
But you weren't there.
I was not present, no, which was very unusual because there were 3 residents involved within this search for Mr. Esparza for supposedly illegal items. And I was the only one not present. The day previous, the sergeant had pulled me over illegally to the side of the road to question me. And I gave him my full cooperation. I said, sir, anything you would like to see at my house, give me a call. I will oblige you. If Mr. Esparza is into any illegalities, let me know. I will not do a story on him. Thank you.
Now, they seized the videotape
Yes, they
of
did,
the last
sir, of
show
your
we
last
did here.
show, and I hope they enjoyed it as much as I did.
They probably learned something. Maybe they called in the federal people, everybody.
Probably everybody and their families and their families' families.
You
have
mean
seen your
because
tape.
you're here, they may break through the door any second?
That possibility may exist, Tom.
Well, this seems to be a widespread problem and growing in the United States, the heavy-handedness of law enforcement.
Yes, it has been, and your viewers have known in the past, I have been involved with prisoners' problems, the plight of gainful employment, visiting problems. I feel that I have been able to take a stand, make a little leeway into the issues. And when this happened and my home was searched, because I was a newspaper reporter simply doing a story, and as my 14th Amendment rights say, I have the right to associate with anyone. Simply because I want to do that does not give law enforcement the right to come into my home to take a story, which is one of the items they took.
And
They wanted to know who was implicated in the story.
Well, basically, Mr. Esparza related to you that, what?
He related to me nothing of a criminal nature, which is what they claimed I did. Things were stolen or embezzled. Things were, sexual exploitation of children, means in committing a felony, none of which I had ever done or they had any proof of. But yet, this is the reasons they broke into my home.
Well, I see they listed a few things there that they were looking for and like this, but how do you get from a man who has served time and who has gotten a job, and evidently was doing the job all right?
Oh, yes, there was no problems whatsoever as far as how well he did his job. In fact, in the few months he did it as well as anybody else, and he did it for the good of the community. He had no private interest whatsoever involved in his decisions.
I don't know. What's the rules about people, ex-felons, having jobs with the city? I don't understand why there would be, if someone's rehabilitated, what would be the problem?
To the best of my knowledge, and Mr. Esparza's, there is no stipulation that I know of within parole regulations that say you cannot hold a job within city government. And as a matter of fact, as I had stated before, when he filled out his application, there was no mention of him having a criminal record.
Now, you sort of live out in an area that's a little bit sparse. Don't you
Yes.
feel a little fear when you've got this type of policing around?
Yes, and in fact, that's one of the things that a dear friend of mine who is law enforcement, I have some on the good side,
Sure,
some on the bad
like
side,
every
like in
business.
every business. And he stated to me, being that it is a small, high desert area, the problems with corrupt police department, the problems with abuse under the color of authority with the police department are very blatant, very bad in a small community, because you're not close to the metropolis like you would, let's say, in the outskirts, the line communities within LA or Orange County, where there's checkpoints, someone to watch out for them. When you live in a community like I do, it's pretty much one person takes care of the other person, unless someone exposes them, as Mr. Esparza and I attempted to do.
Doesn't it seem like, too, it's really thrust so much at poor people and lower middle class? People have problems making ends meet that these things seem to happen to. They don't really go in and drag city councilmen out and mayors out like this.
Very true.
And the judges. And
Very true. And one of the statements Mr. Esparza had made to me was, very seldom do you see wealthy go to prison. And that's quite true. As a matter of fact, as you and I both know, visiting in the federal prison, the one we had gone to, how often, perhaps maybe one person there you would see out of maybe 100 or so, was wealthy. The rest are very poor and minority. They are dependent upon public defenders, which, as Mr. Esparza claims, they are on a conveyor belt type of system.
well, that's the law business, and
That's
obviously
true.
that has nothing to do with rehabilitation.
Very true.
It's simply punishment, and of course denying people to have visitors is probably one of the most cruelest forms,
Yes.
especially when the prisoner is keeping his nose clean in there and doing right, why can't he have visitors, or why can't she?
Well, this to me is still amazing. I do not understand. It would seem to me that the prison system and the officials would like to keep their populace as tranquil as possible in order to prevent riots, because riots cause not only problems amongst the inmates, but the guards too. That jeopardizes their lives when they have problems and unrest. When they have visitors, that somewhat calms the troubled seas, because you and I both know everyone gets lonesome, especially in a situation like that. As I put it in the press conference I had for Mr. Esparza, why put further vindictive suffering upon these people and the families also?
But there's two schools of thought on this, and one is, like you're saying, the other school is that you should deny them contact with friends and relatives as much as possible, to isolate them, break them down to where they're just like robots, and,
That's true.
And are very easy to manage in a vegetable-type state. I think that particular view seems to be the most popular, especially under this administration.
Very true. And I would like to just add something a little further to that. In our particular situation where politics are involved, and he was a city planning commissioner, and that is the fact, most definitely, that the less personal contact, face-to-face, that they can talk and disclose perhaps details or problems within the prison, the better it is for the prison and the officials, because then the less said, the less trouble can come back to them.
So you've sort of been under the microscope, I think, ever since you started
yes.
Making waves with the federal prison people.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be a very strong link between that and what's happened to you as far as your home being broken
I would
into.
say it has to, because the items that were listed on the search warrant pertaining to Mr. Esparza were most definitely not what they seized. They seized, as I quoted, a fishing expedition. They took anything and everything that they wanted to just observe and look at, many of them having to do with my previous boyfriend. I had letters to government officials. I had a tape, parole tape they took belonging to him. I had all kinds of photos, pictures, business receipts, nothing to do with Mr. Esparza, and of course your tape.
And you had just met Mr.
And
Esparza.
I had just met him. So I have no idea.
Well, where is Mr. Esparza now? I mean,
Mr. Esparza has been shipped to the furthest destination, it seems, within the state of California.
why is he in jail?
He is in jail. He had his parole revoked because of his falsification of his job application to the maximum degree they could do, which was 12 months. And, for example, other people who were at his parole hearing, and I was his only witness for the defense, they received a period of approximately 6 months back in custody, and we're talking weapons charges and drugs charges. Mr. Esparza's charge was strictly political, and because of that, he got 12 months, and he was shipped off as far as he could, so that contact with visitors, as you had mentioned before, is very
Well, what are they trying to make the case that Mr. Esparza he did this to get in there to further some type of criminal conspiracy?
This is what they had indicated on his parole papers when he had his hearing. They sent documentation to the parole board, which we claim is hearsay. He was never allowed cross-examination. The whole parole hearing was a whole violation of civil rights and due process. They mentioned that they had averted, let's say, possible misappropriation of funds just in the nick of time when Mr. Esparza's exploits were discovered.
Well, to be a planning commissioner, you couldn't hardly be very effective as a criminal conspirator unless some of the city fathers were in on it.
How very true, Tom. You hit the nail right on the head.
Yes, and so if a person was involved under the planning commission of giving deals to people, well, it'd have to be some of the biggest people in the community, wouldn't it?
I would say so. And the factors which we have in our possession, which we had attempted to disclose, and we're talking property tax records, conveyances of property. We have property down at the tax assessor's office right now between the city and a very prominent business person there who is under lock and key. The average person, myself, for some reason it's been put under lock and key and we can't see it. but yet it's been reconvened. Why, Tom? Is it perhaps they knew exactly what we were up to and they wanted it out of the sight of the public?
Well, what about the college that you're a reporter for? And we won't necessarily go into the name, but have they stood behind you as a reporter on this?
That is a very interesting turn of events. Originally, I was given, in fact, this was the story here. This was home ransack. Con man fools many. I was given the full go-ahead by my teacher to do this story, or any story within the community that was newsworthy.
Mm-hmm.
Always, he said, get the second side to a story, so I did. Since this man has made daily coverage, I'd like to hear what the other side is. Little did I know, after I did the story and got exclusive photos, the teacher had, the minute that my name appeared in the paper as publicist, I was now banished from the paper. I could not do any coverage within the area. The only thing I was allowed to report was lighthearted news coverage, such as movie reviews.
So
I was strictly limited to
someone
that.
in control of the school
Yes.
must have known someone in control of something else, and suddenly you're not a good reporter.
That's true. I was a very, quote, controversial reporter, and now I was involved in what they classified as conflict of interest.
Well, controversial reporter, I thought that was good.
That's what I thought.
Isn't that what a reporter's to do?
I thought I was quite a good investigative reporter, but evidently the people who control the school and the city hall control the newspaper, I found out recently. And you print what they print, and if it's anything, also I did an excellent story on the prison within our community. Any issues involving the prisons, support of the prisons, or inmates, or ex-con, you're blackballed from all media. You do not print that.
That's just states the case for fewer and fewer people now are owning more and more newspapers from around the country. In fact, just handfuls of peoples and families owning at least most of the major newspapers.
Yes.
And of course they're tied directly into the corporations and tied into the political parties, and away you go. So you stuck your foot in it again, Anna, huh?
I sure do, and this time I did it great.
Okay,
I mean,
now,
it seems like I seem to get in it worse than I did before, but I still feel there's light at the end of the tunnel.
yeah, because you're a fighter. I know that.
I am a fighter.
Okay, so that's enough to have scared people off.
Oh, I have definitely
average.
scared people. I have had actual threats to me and my family.
Phone calls or?
No, I've had a party show up and says, this is the story, I'm a friend, but if you continue on with what you're tackling, they will no longer consider it a joke. And you do have 2 nice children at home. You'd like to see those nice children, wouldn't you?
Oh, that's the establishments
Yes.
doing that, huh? Nice people.
Very nice.
Sounds to me like a lot of the people inside the prison would probably be better outside, and some of the guys running the government should be in the prison.
This is what we were attempting to get the point across, and we were stopped in our tracks. As I stated in Mr. Esparza's parole hearing, there are those far more contemptible than he on the outside going free than he.
Well, it seems like if there is a paper to fill out, and if it does not ask you if you're a felon, and do you know that it did?
No, it didn't. In fact, I have the paperwork here. There was no mention of criminal record. And what I have been told recently is on new job applications, that is one foot forward for the convicts, and that's that discrimination in that way. New job applications are not supposed to mention criminal record unless it's necessary for the security of the job. Now, perhaps on the second initial application, once you get into hiring position, then they may ask you. But to disqualify you on the initial application itself, they can no longer do that.
So you're actually the only champion really out there, this man's problem, it sounds like.
Yes, and I would say that is another reason that prisons do not want visitors and outside contact, which hopefully if we do get the book published and we do get some support from your viewers, which we have an address to write to, I would love to see more inmates have people to write and help them, because Mr. Esparza and the fellow I was helping in Arizona, in that area there, unless they have someone on the outside, they have no chance of equity at all
Now,
And this is what scares officials.
but now you've gone to the attack. Now what are you doing about this? I mean,
Okay, what we are currently doing is, even though his parole appeal has accidentally been lost in the paperwork, I have just today sent in a new appeal for him because there's a time frame. You can only file within so many days.
I see.
I filed it, and hopefully he will now get a new hearing, a little more equitable. Hopefully, I have got a case going, federal civil rights issues against the local sheriffs on unlawful seizure of property, unlawful detainment, violation of civil rights, and search and seizure.
That's probably one of the biggest sheriff's departments in the United
Most
States.
definitely.
Los Angeles County
Yes,
Sheriff.
it is.
Yes. And so you're going up against the big boys.
I'm going against the big boys,
And
yes.
they don't play fair, you know.
No, I found that out, especially when the ones involved have been within the department for quite a few years, and their whole lives are at stake. And here's a little person like myself trying to champion cause for the inmates' rights and prisoners, and I'm threatening their little world. I would be intimidated too, but I would not go to the extent of bodily and giving death threats to the people and their families if they don't back off.
Yeah, I mean, that seems such an overkill for one person who's trying to do something that I perceive, and I think most people would perceive as a good thing, to have that kind of heat come down on you. Now, what does this do to your children? Now, you've already gone through as being a family of an inmate in a federal pen. You had a lot of problems there from ostracism, maybe in your own family like that, and now your kids have to live under this threat.
My children now have been so harassed after the break-in of my house that there are times when they just come into the house and just lock the doors and just give up because somehow around the neighborhood, word has got out, that I am definitely representing this, quote, ex-con, and the middle-class community there, being that I'm also single and the only single one in the neighborhood, that doesn't help matters either.
The conservative...
faction does not appreciate this type of support, and my kids are suffering. They're holding up great because they just usually come back and they say, so what, my mother's just as good as you people.
In the schools, have they had any problems there?
Within the schools, I would say for the most part, no. I only had one problem. I was banished from my daughter's unified school district involving this story too, because I had reported on one of their local programs on sexual assault prevention, and I had put some constructive suggestions, as I had in Mr. Esparza's case. That is the only way where she's suffering and I'm suffering. I'm pretty much banished from the school itself as far as covering anything and trying to give a balanced side of the story.
Yeah, but you, as a private citizen, you could still, you're supposed to be able to go in and report.
Well, I have figured that I'm going to tackle it from this way. Even though they may not let me put it in print, I have decided if this other book comes through, which we've already titled it Guilty Till Proven Innocent, and hopefully it's in the possibility of publication, I've already got a second novel on the fire, and that's going to have to do with various other problems within the judicial system and certain crimes which nobody wants to print about. They only want one side printed.
Maybe you'll have to go back to, like a lot of people around the country, getting that old mimeograph machine on the back porch and
the underground press.
The underground press. We need it in this country. If there
Very
ever was
much.
a time for an underground press, we need it now. But unfortunately, there's less now than what there has been in years past.
And it's a shame because even though I was not, quote, on a payroll, the issues within this case was I was a newspaper reporter for all intents purposes. I had legal press passes, and to be stopped by law enforcement threatening me if I don't talk, they're going to throw a arrest warrant on me and I can talk at the local station.
Now, you were stopped right out on the highway.
Right in the
now,
middle of
what's
the highway.
probable cause there? A tail light or something?
No, there was no probable cause other than, quote, I was listed in the paper as Mr. Esparza's publicist. The sergeant says, I verify the fact, yes, you are whom they said you were.
I mean, he stopped you and said that's specifically why he stopped you?
Mm-hmm. He said that...
See, that's what the average conservative and people like that don't understand. They don't understand how the heavy hand of the law can operate.
No, I don't choose to particularly go into that vein that I am deliberately attempting to get in trouble with law enforcement. I stand up for issues as you do. And the conservative side of the community, unless they've actually experienced problems within law enforcement, they feel they're all just. Well, like we had discussed before, within any system, you do have a few people who are not quite perfect. And all it takes is one not so perfect person, as
Yes.
this sergeant was, to create a hell on earth for both of us.
What do you think the chances are of getting Mr. Esparza out?
I would like to think optimistically, but I know the forces whom we are up against, and they are very powerful and have a lot of money behind them. And unless we can get some help from the viewing public, either through legal defense or someone to back us in some way, politicians, which we are still pleading with, that I think his chances of getting out, probably not. I would like to think he has a chance for a new parole hearing and getting out. He has already done his 6 months.
A lot of people think, too, that something like this is an isolated case, Anna, but we know from the mail I get all over the United States, these things go on all the time, from coast to coast. And yet they try to tell us that we're living in this great land of the free and we should be so thankful, and that we have these wonderful law enforcement people. Now we see the Attorney General of the United States is almost under indictment, or at least investigation, and half the people in Washington, and these are the people that are having to do with picking up the little people.
Well, that's true, and like in the case of the particular sergeant from the Sheriff's Department who had done the initial search warrant and affidavits to get the search warrant, when it came time to giving me the paperwork that we needed in federal court, I was amazed at the new paperwork and the amount which he just happened to come up with.
In other words, you have as much justice as you can afford in this country. Is that not true?
That is true. Money talks.
It seems almost impossible for someone charged with a major crime to have any way of having a good defense because of the money it costs.
Well, this is what I definitely feel, and I had got my foot in the door tackling these various issues, and if we win, it would be a great precedent for all convicts, because one of the issues I am bringing up, it's in the Constitution, the right to associate, the 14th Amendment.
Anna, it's been good having you. We're going to have to go now. You got to report back to us on the next peril of Anna, like the perils of Pauline.
Hopefully victory.
And be careful and watch your back. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next time.